Hello and welcome everyone to Varsity Tutors Virtual Summer Camp. I'm Brian, and I've got to admit I'm a little bit nervous right now. I know from watching YouTube that if you're on camera with Coyote Peterson, somebody's getting bit or stung by something ferocious, but fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, we're indoors today, so I think we'll be all right. We know that a lot of you had summer camps and summer vacations planned that you may not be able to get to given what's going on in the world. So we figured we'd bring the brave wilderness to you with one of the bravest wilderness explorers I think the world has ever seen in Coyote. Before we get started, Coyote wanted me to remind you he doesn't sting or bite. So he wants to hear from you. You guys can see in the video, next to the video panel, there's a chat box and some polling station. He's going to ask you some questions about what you've been stung by, about kind of what you know about animal stings. So keep it interactive there. And if you have any questions for Coyote, at the end of class, we're going to be taking some of your questions and we'll find out everything we've ever wanted to know about brave wilderness, about his experiences in the wild, and about animal stings. Right before that, I want to give you guys a warning. If you have a camera ready in about a half an hour, I don't know if you guys are looking at that hat that Coyote's wearing, saying, how do I get one of those? There's a chance to do that. Everybody's going to have a chance to take a picture with Coyote. Well, if you lean into the screen, take a selfie or have somebody take it for you. And if you upload that to Instagram and tag Coyote and Varsity Tutors, you'll be entered to win that very hat autographed and personalized to you. So have a camera ready, get your questions going throughout the class so we can talk to Coyote about those at the end of class. But without wasting too much more time, we wanted to hand it over to the man, the myth, the legend. Welcome, Coyote Peterson, to Varsity Tutors.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate the wonderful introduction. Hey, guys, how's it going? Welcome to the science of stings. Now, I have a feeling if you're joining us that there's a good chance you've seen me bitten and stung by a whole world of creepy, crawly creatures that call our planet home. But today we're going to get into some more of the detail of how we filmed the sting episodes. I know that we're always encouraging everybody to watch all the other content on the channel as well. You know, the cute, cuddly stuff, sloths, manatees, snapping turtles, elephants, lions, bears, a whole world of things. But it never fails that you guys absolutely love to see me rolling around on the ground in pain while Mark asks, Coyote, are you okay? So if it's you joining us for the first time and you're not aware of the Brave Wilderness channel, we are one of the largest, I should say the largest animal adventure brand in the digital space. We also produce a television series for Animal Planet called Brave the Wild, which you can check out on YouTube TV or Hulu, or of course, Animal Planet itself. But without further ado, let's get into some of the science behind my most famous stings. Now, before we talk about these creatures, first, let's just take a look at today's agenda. We've got some great stuff lined up for you guys. We're going to talk about stings, exactly what they are, where they come from, why creatures sting you. We're going to talk about where my inspiration came from to actually go through some of these stings to bring you guys the entertainment, education, and warning if you ever come across some of these creatures in the wild. And then, of course, we'll get into some of my most famous and you guys' favorite stings. But before we do that, first, I want to ask you guys a couple of questions. I know you may know a lot about me, but I want to know about some of the things that you have been stung by. So we got this awesome slide that we're going to pop up on screen with some creepy looking ants in the background. And I want to know, what have you been stung by? So let's get those answers flowing in here. And I'll try to call out a couple of them as they, wow, okay, they are flying by very quickly. Okay, here we go. Yep, bees, that is a very common one this time of year. I guess the thing to note about bees is that if you're stung by a honeybee, they do technically lose their stinger, so you can't be stung more than once, unless, of course, you disturb an entire hive. Yep, wasps, I see wasps and hornets, both very popular things that you'll see possibly at your summer picnic. No, murder hornets. I'm also seeing a lot of murder hornets. No, I don't think you guys are going to get stung by murder hornets this summer. I know that's been a crazy media hype thing going around right now. Yes, I was stung by the Japanese giant hornet, but I don't think you guys are going to be running into any of that this year. Let me see what else is going by here. I see some bullet ants. No, I mean, if you've been stung by a bullet ant, I'm not saying that you didn't, but it's really hard to go into the right locations to get stung by those guys. And I hope you weren't stung by one. Oh, jellyfish. I saw jellyfish fly by. Jellyfish is actually technically a sting. I've not been stung by the jellyfish yet, at least not on camera. I've been stung by one before. And that is definitely something you guys might run into this summer if you're visiting any of the beaches on the east or west coast. So do watch out for jellyfish. Yep, more bees. I saw it. Fire ants. Yes, fire ants. We recently released a video calling them volcano ants, just to play off that whole murder hornet hype. The fire ants, yes, are definitely something that you guys can easily encounter in your backyard, whether you live in Florida, all throughout the southeastern United States, down into the Southwest, and even as far north as Oregon and Washington. So yeah, if you're out on picnics this summer, do not poke unassuming mounds of dirt. They very well may have fire ants inside of them. And trust me, guys, when they swarm you, it is bad news. That's a lot of good answers. You guys are flying those by. Okay, great answers. I'm sorry that you guys have been stung by as many things as you have. Hopefully you can avoid some of those this summer as well. And I'm going to educate you guys on the best way to do that. So we've got a couple more questions here. We've got one more. Why do stings hurt so much? So you guys can actually chime in here and tell me, which answer is it? Why do stings hurt so much? Give you guys a couple of seconds here. Yep, they're definitely sharp. We do know that. I mean, I guess if you're out running around on a jog and you get stung in the face by a bumblebee, sweat and salt can't enter your skin. Is it all your imagination that you feel pain? I mean, it wasn't necessarily my imagination when I was feeling pain. I can tell you guys, some of those really packed a punch. And yeah, stings don't hurt. Well, if you picked E, pain, question mark, they don't hurt at all. You're tougher than I am. So, okay, I'll give you guys, which I think you know, and I see a lot of them out there. The proper answer is C. Stings produce venom. It's fair to say that those little tiny stingers on some insects, you can feel those going into your skin. So yes, there's a little bit of pain involved in that, but it is in fact the venom and the way that it is reacting with your body that causes the most pain. And everybody reacts to pain and venom differently. So that's very important to know. I mean, your little brother might get stung by a hornet and be like, a hornet just stung me. That was really bad. And then you might get stung by a hornet, being the big brother, being like, I'm way tougher than him. And you might end up crying. And then you may say, am I not as tough as my little brother or little sister? Not necessarily the case. It could be how your body receives that venom and how you react to the pain that your nerves essentially give off because of that venom's reaction with your body. Very good, guys. That's a couple of great questions right off the bat. We'll come back to some questions again here in a minute, but let's get into sting science. Sting science is pretty fascinating. Now, what I'm going to do is go through just a couple of things. We'll talk about stings, where they come from, why you get stings, and then we'll get into some more of the detail of specifically the insects that I have come across. Now, the first thing that I want to note is that there's a big difference between a bite and a sting. A lot of times people come up to me and be like, hey, you're that guy that got bit by the bullet ant, aren't you? I'm like, well, I mean, technically bullet ants, yes, can bite. They can bite to hold on to things or to forage throughout the forest, but technically it's the sting that hurts. There's a big difference between a venomous bite and a venomous sting. In many instances, a bite, if it's a venomous bite or a non-venomous bite, alligator, snapping turtle, shark, lion, megalodon, T-Rex, whatever the bite, the catastrophic damage coming from the jaw power and those teeth can be pretty damaging. But a venomous bite is going to yield a much larger amount of venom than a sting. That's because when animals are biting with venom, they're biting to specifically kill and take down their prey. That's not necessarily the case with stings. So the stings that I've taken are very, very different than the bites I've taken. So why this is important is that, like I said, the sting is less venom than a bite. And if you join us for next week's class that's all about bites, we'll get into why those bites are oftentimes so much more catastrophic. It's not likely that if you're stung by something, you're going to die from a single sting. People that end up dying from stings usually are due to an allergic reaction to the venom. Now, that's not to say that a single bullet ant sting couldn't kill you if you had an allergic reaction, but it's oftentimes people that are swarmed by something like an entire colony of Africanized honeybees or giant hornets. A number of stings and a greater venom yield leads to bigger problems. So what exactly is a sting? Well, stingers are something that you'll find on various different insect and arachnid species. Now, spiders technically don't sting, they bite, but scorpions, which as you guys probably know are arachnids, sting. All the things that I've been stung by, at least within the realm of the insect sting pain index, are true insects and not arachnids. And while I have done some arachnid bites and stings, that's a little bit different than my climb up the insect sting pain index. Now, a sting is very, very unique. Oftentimes, it is only the female insect that is capable of stinging. That's because a stinger is actually something called an ovipositor. The ovipositor is this modified reproductive organ that the females use to actually lay their eggs. However, that stinger can also be used as a defense. So whether you are a bullet ant, a honeybee, a giant hornet, a tarantula hawk, a velvet ant, if you encounter one of these animals and you're stung by it, there is a really good chance that that stinger came from a female. I think there are a few insect species where males do have stingers, but they're not nearly as large as the females. One that's specifically worth noting is the cow killer or the velvet ant. That has one of the largest stingers per body size ratio in the entire insect kingdom. We'll get into that one a little bit more in a second. Yeah, it definitely hurt. So what exactly happens when something stings you? Well, nobody wants to be stung, and oftentimes stings come as a mistake. Unless, of course, you're Coyote Peterson, you've gone out into the environment, you've successfully caught one of these animals, and you've literally placed it onto your forearm. Insects only sting if they feel as if they're being threatened. Now, it could be that you go out into your mailbox and you haven't gotten the newspaper in a while, and wasps have built a nest up in the corner. You pull out that newspaper and the wasp's saying, "Whoa, buddy, this is my home." You're disturbing it, so they're going to come out, attack you, and sting you. They're not stinging you because they want to sting you. They're stinging you because they're wanting to defend their nest, where essentially they're laying their eggs. Now, a lot of stings end up happening because people accidentally step on an insect. The greatest example of that would be honeybees in the summer. Walking around, whether you're at a water park or your favorite lake, could be your very own backyard. Bees love to pollinate flowers. Flowers grow in our yards. You step on a bee, you're probably going to get stung. However, bees aren't the only thing on the ground that you could possibly come across and get stung by. That brings us then, of course, to something like the velvet ant. Now, the velvet ant is not technically an ant at all. It's a wasp. But these ground-dwelling wasps, if you step on them, whether in the sand or in the grass, and you get stung, they're definitely going to let you know it. It's a very, very painful sting. But again, it's the venom that's reacting with your body that is causing the true pain. So those stingers, right, they're pretty teeny tiny, even on something like a tarantula hawk or a giant hornet. We're talking less than an inch in length. We're talking, millimeters in some instances. But once that stinger, with as sharp as it is, like a hypodermic needle, enters into your skin, every one of these insects has a venom gland in its abdomen. They then can pump that venom into their victim, and it's that venom that is causing you to be in a momentous amount of searing pain. And every insect sting is different. Again, like I was saying earlier, it's all about how your body reacts to the venom. So how do you avoid being stung? We've gone through a couple of scenarios where you may be walking around in your backyard and you step on something and it stings you. But to avoid being stung, it's really quite simple. First of all, if you see a wasp nest, a hornet nest, a bee colony of any sort, don't get close to it. If you don't provoke these insects to attack, they're likely not going to bug you. If you're walking around outside in the summer, wear flip-flops, sandals, shoes, whatever it is. I love walking through the grass barefoot as well, guys, but trust me, once you've got stung by an insect more than once, you kind of learn that maybe flip-flops was the way to go. So the best way to avoid these creatures this summer is to not only be aware of your environment and the fact that they're there, but if you see them, admire them from a safe distance. I oftentimes see people, a hornet, a wasp, it's swarming around me. Do you know what this does? When you swat at something, it immediately thinks something's trying to kill me. That will provoke something to attack and sting you. As crazy as it sounds, if you're out there enjoying a Pepsi or a Coca-Cola or a popsicle, a lot of these creatures are drawn into bright colors, sweet smells, and nectars because technically they're pollinators. So when you've got soda pop or you've got an ice cream or a popsicle, they're thinking, maybe I can get some sugars out of this. When you start swatting at them, that's when they get annoyed and that's when they might try to sting you. So as crazy as it sounds, if you just keep your calm, take your delicious beverage or treat, walk the other direction as quick as you can without swatting at it, you're probably Going to be just fine. Okay, so what's the world's most painful sting? We're going to get into that, but first, let's get into where this inspiration came from. Why in the world would anybody voluntarily get stung by the world's most painful stinging insects? I don't know. I really can't tell you, even though that I've done it. Well, I can tell you why I did it, because it was to educate you guys about all these things. But when it started, I looked at Justin Schmidt, who I didn't know. I'm going to tell you guys a story here in a second. I'm more referring right now to Justin, a brilliant entomologist located in Arizona. And I've had the fortunate opportunity to meet Justin, work alongside Justin. He looked at the insect kingdom and said, well, people are getting stung by things all the time. He wanted to rank all of these creatures. So he developed the Insect Sting Pain Index that ranks the pain of insect stings on a scale of 1 to 4. And he's been stung by, honestly, more things than I've been stung by. I sort of jumped over a lot of the smaller stinging insects and went right to the big grand slam ones for the purposes of entertainment on YouTube. But it was Justin's Insect Sting Pain Index that got me started. Now, the stings for me actually began, I'll tell you guys a quick story. My mom lives in Tucson, Arizona. And I know you guys are probably thinking to yourselves, yeah, I listen to my mom sometimes. Let me tell you guys, if you're a younger Coyote Pack member, listen to your mom. She always knows what's best. My mom said there's a nest of harvester ants out back behind her house. And as Mark and Mario and I were setting off onto an adventure, she wanted to make sure we didn't walk through it and get stung. She said, I was stung by one of these the other day. One of the most intense pains I've ever gone through. I was like, come on, Mom, an ant sting? Really? Let me see how bad this really is. So I had Mario do a little bit of research, and he found Justin Schmidt. Found that there was this insect sting pain index, and that apparently the harvester ant has one of the most potent stings in the insect kingdom based on the amount of venom in its single sting. So we said, all right, well, let's see how bad this really is. Obviously, we went out, filmed that video. The rest is kind of history. It became very popular. But in the process of filming this video, a lot of the members of our audience started talking about the bullet ant, the velvet ant, the tarantula hawk, all of these things that I should get stung by. Eventually, we did our research and started saying to ourselves, well, how do we take the roadmap that Justin created and then turn it into videos for everybody to enjoy, become educated on, and then, of course, hopefully avoid getting stung by these things in the future. So there you have it. The inspiration for all of my stings came from Justin Schmidt and his creation of the Insect Sting Pain Index. Now, before we actually get up into the most famous things that I've been stung by, we've got another question for you guys. You guys ready for another question? So this one's fun. I like this. Which of the following insects have a pain level of a 4 rating? Remember, Justin ranked these things on a scale of 1 to 4. So between these 5 things here, which one do you guys think is a level 4? I'm going to have a sip of water while you guys think about that. Okay, I see some answers coming in here. Yeah, giant hornet, definitely up there. Yeah, you guys know bullet ant. You guys have seen your videos. Yeah, Executioner Wasp is king of sting. I'm going to give you guys 3 more seconds. Do you think you know? Yeah. Okay, so it's a little bit of a trick question. Technically, all 5 of these rank as a 4 on the Insect Sting Pain Index. And the fun thing, I guess at least for you guys watching the videos, is that I have been stung by all 5 of these insects, which brings us to the sting lineup. This is it, guys. It's fun to sit back and look at all of these different creatures, of which, if you can see this up on your screen, those are 5 of the 6 thumbnails from 6 of arguably our most famous videos, I think, on the YouTube channel at this point, which is pretty fun. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take this next part of the class to go through these different stings. I'm going to talk to you guys about what these creatures are, what the different stings were like, what I went through, and a little bit of how we filmed these episodes and then kind of took it to the next level. So if you guys are ready, it's time to enter the sting zone. Now, I told you guys about the harvester ants, and while that technically wasn't one of the top 6, it did set the stage to return to Arizona to find something known as the cow killer. Now, this insect is not technically an ant, even though it is called the velvet ant. Like I said earlier, this is a wingless species of wasp. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, but they're so cute. Look at this picture. They're fuzzy. Obviously, you can see why they're called velvet ants, because it looks like they are covered in velvet, and they have an exoskeleton, which is the outward covering on their body that is rock solid. Now, this is a ground-dwelling wasp, which means that if you're out walking barefoot throughout the desert, which honestly, it's just a bad idea. But you can also find them in the southeastern United States, down in Georgia and Texas, New Mexico. Those areas also have velvet ants. And I wouldn't recommend anybody walk anywhere barefoot these days. You don't know what you're going to step on. But if you step on a velvet ant, you're not going to squish it. Their exoskeleton is so incredibly rock solid that what you will do is step on it. It's going to feel like, ee, I'm getting squished. And then it's going to turn its body around and it's going to slam you with that massive stinger. Let's go back to that slide real quick so that you guys can see how big the stinger of the velvet ant is. Check this out. So you see that thumbnail right there? That is the true extension of the velvet ant stinger. And I got to tell you guys, big props to Mark, because he's done all the photographs for all these thumbnails. It was so incredibly hard to get this thumbnail holding my hand still while this thing is putting out its stinger while trying to get that thumbnail with a macro lens on the camera. So you can see how long that stinger is. And when I was stung by it, the stinger actually went in at a sideways angle into my arm, and I could feel every little millimeter of that stinger entering into my body. Now, the velvet ant does technically rank as a 4 on the insect sting pain index, but the sting really doesn't last for that long. I did have some swelling. I did have some residual swelling after the fact, but after about 15 minutes, I was back to like, oh, okay, cool. That was bad. I'm still noticing the pain, but not necessarily rolling around on the ground screaming in agony, which I know you guys think is like the funniest thing on the face of the planet. So after we did the cow killer, right on that same exact trip, and this may be something that you guys don't know, is that we actually filmed the cow killer and the Tarantula Hawk back to back. We stumbled upon the cow killer, as you guys saw in the video, walking. They're actually pretty common and rather easy to find. But the Tarantula Hawk was extremely difficult to catch. Now, if you go to the Southwest in the springtime when all the flowers are blooming, Tarantula Hawks are everywhere. But we showed up in like late August, just before monsoon season. The hawks weren't necessarily as active, so it took us several days before we finally found one. And if you guys saw that video, or I should say the video leading up to the actual Tarantula Hawk, you'll know that I had to dive into a cholla cactus to actually catch this wasp so we could get the video. People oftentimes ask, Coyote, what is the scariest sting you have ever gone through? And I could say each and every one was scary in its own unique right, but the Tarantula Hawk, let's pop back to that slide again real quick, Brian. Check this out, guys. That is a massive spider wasp. That is the biggest wasp species in the United States. So big that, as you can see from that little picture there in the lower left-hand corner, they kill spiders. I mean, enough said, right? And when you see it in the entomology forceps right up next to my finger, again, Mark, awesome shot by getting that thumbnail for us. That's a super intimidating insect. So when I was stung by this, yeah, I was extremely nervous to go through that pain. Now, when that stinger, you can see it's pretty sizable, entered into my arm, it immediately felt like a bolt of electricity surging through my body. The reason for that is their venom has components to it that will paralyze its prey. And that prey, not prey that they're eating, prey that they're using to host their egg, that being the tarantula. When they sting a tarantula, it paralyzes that tarantula. That's how powerful that venom is. To put that tarantula in a state of paralysis for weeks straight, while its egg hatches on top, burrows in, and then eats the tarantula from the inside out. I mean, crazy, right? That's like a literal horror film within the insect and arachnid world. But that venom was powerful enough to put my forearm in a state of paralysis. My entire hand seized up. I'll never forget that feeling, to be like, I can't move my hand and arm right now, let alone the fact that the searing pain that was shooting up my arm for a solid 5 minutes definitely put me on the ground as well. But it is important to note that with the sting of the Tarantula Hawk, that extreme pain only lasted for about 5 minutes. I did experience swelling and some itchiness after the fact, but it wasn't nearly as painful as some of the insects we're going to get to here in a second. However, I do want to note about the tarantula hawk. This is a species that is very, very common. In fact, there are spider wasps in almost every state throughout the United States. Not all of them are as big as the tarantula hawk, but if you see a tarantula hawk, this is not an insect that is out to get you. In fact, your odds of being stung by a tarantula hawk are extremely slim. Although I do want to put out a warning to anybody living in the Southwest, because these tarantula hawks will come in and land like an Apache helicopter on the surface of swimming pool water. Why are they doing that? They're actually hydrating off of your pool water. People will see that and think, oh, it's a dead wasp in my pool. I'm going to scoop it up, grab it with my hand or a cup. Bad idea. You do that, that is how you're going to get stung. So if you see one that lands on the surface of the water, back up slowly. It's going to do its thing, eventually take off. You and the wasp will be just fine. Okay, those were our first two that we filmed back to back. Those came out on the YouTube channel in the fall of 2016 and set the stage for what may be the most famous episode on the Brave Wilderness channel. More people know me as the guy that was bitten, and then I got to correct them, stung by the bullet ant, than they probably know me as the name Coyote Peterson. The bullet ant was the big episode that we went out and filmed at the end of 2016. I'm going to tell you guys that story real quick here. The bullet ant was honestly the holy grail of sting episodes to get. For Justin Schmidt, this was the peak of the insect sting pain index, the most painful sting in the world. Finding bullet ants is not exactly the easiest thing. To do this, we had to go to Costa Rica. We worked on a wildlife reserve called the Costa Rican Amphibian Research Center. We were filming some other work there already. And before we actually showed up at the location, we talked to our location expert, Brian, and said, you got any bullet ants? He's like, I do have bullet ants. The problem with the bullet ants is you never know when and where you're going to see a bullet ant. That's because there are multiple different types of bullet ants. And when I say types, I mean strategic bullet ants throughout the bullet ant nest. So finding a bullet ant nest is not necessarily as easy as you would think. Now, stumbling upon a foraging bullet ant throughout the forest, that's not too tough. But the bullet ant that we wanted specifically to sting me is what's considered a soldier. That is the ant that defends the opening to the burrow. Those ants are the most aggressive and they have the largest yield of venom. So specifically, that was the bullet ant that I wanted to be stung by. Now, if you guys have seen that episode, which I'm imagining a lot of you have, I was extremely excited to have found a nest, let alone caught one of those ants. And I'd say it's probably a pretty rare thing when a human is that excited about catching a stinging insect so that they can then get stung by it and go through a massive amount of pain. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe a little bit, but finding that ant was extremely important to us because then we were able to film that episode and find out, is this in fact more painful than the sting of the velvet ant and the tarantula hawk? And as you can see from that episode, yes, the bullet ant has an extremely potent Panarin toxin. That toxin will attack your body and put you in a really bad state. My arm swelled up to nearly twice its normal size, and I was in considerable pain for about 36 straight hours. So much so that night after I was stung by the bullet ant, when I went to sleep, you guys like cuddle up with your pillow and you're laying down, I could hear my heartbeat in my arm, the way that it was pulsating, thump, 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 because my arm was just swelling and swelling and swelling. Yes, at that point in time, it was without question the most painful sting I had ever gone through. Now, we released that episode in December of 2016, which thank you to everybody that watched it. It was one of our most viral videos of all time. Hit the #1 trending page or hit #1 on the trending page on YouTube for like, it was something crazy. It was like 36 hours or something like that, like an insane amount of time to be the #1 video up there on trending. And you guys all got to learn about the bullet ant. And that's one important thing that I just do want to note while we're in the middle of our climb here up the insect sting pain index, is that it's not all about me taking the stings and rolling around on the ground in pain for you guys' entertainment. It's also about the education. What we were able to do with that video specifically was bring to light a very cool insect. I mean, when you really look at the macro shots of that ant, that thing is like an alien from another planet. And I'll tell you guys, they are smart. When that ant, I'm actually here, this is kind of cool. I got a little prop here for you guys. That right there is the original capsule that we had the bullet ant in. And no, that's not a real bullet ant. That is the Brave Wilderness branded figurine bullet ant. And actually what I can do so you guys can see that a little bit better is I'll hold up my lesson plan here. That's the true size of a bullet ant right there, a little over an inch in length. And it's such a cool little insect, even as a little figurine. I absolutely love these things. Super alien looking, perfectly designed to survive in that rainforest ecosystem. And like I said, incredibly smart. When you really look at one of those ants inside of a little glass capsule and it's looking back at you, you're like, huh, you're definitely analyzing this situation. And I can tell that if I don't let you go soon, you're going to sting me one way or another. I was stung. The rest is history. So once we did the bullet ant episode, we're like, okay, cool. That's probably it, right? I guess not. There's this guy, the Warrior Wasp. Now, there's a big difference between the bullet ant and the Warrior Wasp. Justin Schmidt was also stung by the Warrior Wasp, and he questioned whether or not the Warrior Wasp was in fact a more painful sting than the bullet ant. So I said, well, if Justin was questioning it, I feel like I have to question it as well. It's an absolutely beautiful insect. It's got a bluish coloration, almost velvet-like in this covering that coats its body. And here's the big difference between a wasp and an ant. A nest of ants technically can crawl. So if you walk into a nest of bullet ants and you get stung a few times, you're brushing those ants off of you, you can run 10 or 20 feet and get away. You disturb a nest of warrior wasps, guys, it is game over. Now, if you've seen that episode, you know that we successfully found a nest in beautiful structure, this incredible nest positioned up on this tree branch, and it is intimidating. It's intimidating to find a nest of bullet ants. It's way more intimidating to see a nest full of warrior wasps. And the reason for that, the reason they're called warriors, is that when they attack with force. Now, the difference between a warrior wasp and something like a swarm of bees is that when a bee stings, it loses its stinger. When the warrior wasp stings, it doesn't lose its stinger. It can keep stinging over and over and over again. So if you disturb a nest and you were swarmed, that makes this insect way more dangerous than something like a bullet ant. Now, when it came down to the sting, yes, it was extremely painful. I would put it on par with the bullet ant, but to be honest with you, the pain did not last as long as the bullet ant. It still ranks as a 4 on the insect sting pain index, but the aftermath, I would say it's not all that much different than your common wasp or hornet that you get stung by in your backyard. But here's the kicker. It does have a larger venom yield. More venom can be more pain, more damage. And when you're talking about a swarm of them, a giant nest of warrior wasps is always going to be bigger than a nest of the common wasps that you'll find in your backyard or in your mailbox. Hornets, yeah, they can build some pretty big nests, but the warrior wasp specifically, yeah, that's a tongue twister, is definitely not something that you ever want to mess with. Although your odds of ever encountering one of these, pretty much non-existent unless you live in Central or South America, you're clearing out brush and you accidentally disturb a nest. So the Warrior Wasp episode released on the Brave Wilderness channel in 2017. And we thought to ourselves, yep, this is going to be it. We did the bullet ant. We did the Warrior Wasp. We've done the things that Justin has investigated. That's got to be it. Well, it wasn't quite it. There was the Executioner Wasp. But before we get to the Executioner Wasp, I'll tell you guys that story in a second. First, we've got the Japanese giant hornet, the murder hornet, as they've now been named by the media. Why would I want to get stung by a hornet of this size? Well, you guys as the audience, before we even got to the Executioner Wasp, were saying, Coyote, are you going to get stung by the Japanese giant hornet? Justin Schmidt never got stung by the Japanese giant hornet. Justin was technically stung by a species of Asian hornet, but it's important to note that there are various different species of Asian hornets. And what's kind of cool is, let's pop away from that slide for a second. right here, I have a very cool case with the 4 unique species of Asian hornets. That one in the upper corner there, that is the Japanese giant. You can see all of them are pretty big. This box of bugs was actually given to me by one of the entomologists that we worked with when in Japan. So we were working with a team of experts, which they all thought I was crazy because I was going to get stung by one of these things. And one of those entomologists actually had been stung, showed me pictures, was stung on the leg. It rotted a hole in his leg. Actually, let me rephrase that. His leg got so swollen, they had to cut a hole in his leg to drain out all of the liquid that was building up. And then that turned into an infection that rotted a hole in his leg. Yeah, true story. So when you're me and you see this and you're thinking, am I really going to get stung by this thing? Most of the time I was like, well, maybe we won't catch it. We spent 3 weeks searching for the giant hornet. Lo and behold, on our second to last day in Japan, we ended up finding one, and the rest is pretty much history. But that sting, guys, was massive. Now, I mentioned earlier, stinger size and venom yield. The giant hornet is such a dangerous insect, or has the potential to be dangerous and even deadly, because it is so big and because the venom yield is so massive. Now, when I was stung by a single one of these on my forearm, the pain felt like getting punched in the face. Clear, perfect clock in the face from Mike Tyson. I literally saw white stars, fell backwards. I barely, honestly, remember filming that scene. Thankfully, I was able to get out some sort of coherent rambling that described to you guys the pain that I was going through, but it was bad. My arm then swelled up to twice its normal size. My hand looked like it had a rubber glove on it that you blew up to expand. I looked like a big swollen marshmallow man, and the pain lasted for considerably for close to 24 hours. And then it was like 36 hours of swelling and itching before the symptoms started to die down. But with the giant hornet, again, the reason that we said that dethroned the bullet ant and the warrior wasp is because of the danger level. If you were to be swarmed by an entire mass of giant hornets, they're going to get you. And they're going to get you so good that they're probably going to kill you. 40 to 50 people die every single year in Asian countries based on being stung by these giant hornets. Now, there's the Chinese giant hornet and the Japanese giant hornet. They're slightly different based on their geographical positioning, but both of them are extremely potent and extremely dangerous. So that brings us to the last sting that I took, or seemingly the last sting that I took, the true king of sting, the Executioner Wasp. Now, this thing means business. As you guys know, the king of sting, we always had this spin on the fact that this creature truly was the king. It is ranked as a 4 on the insect sting pain index. Could I have rewritten Justin's scale and said this is a 5? Yeah, maybe, but I wanted to keep it within that realm of 1 to 4. But this, without question, is as painful as the giant hornet. The big difference is the toxicity of the venom. This wasp is the largest paper wasp species in the world, and it has a venom that is so potent, it literally cooked a hole in my arm. And when I say cooked a hole, I mean that the venom broke down my cells, red blood cells, skin, tissue layers, and formed a divot in my arm. Yes, I do still have a small scar today. It's impossible really to see on camera, but yes, it was painful. The pain lasted for weeks, and it's definitely not something you'd ever want to be stung by. But again, like the warrior wasps and the giant hornet, because these things build a nest, it makes them more dangerous potentially than the bullet ant. But when it comes to actually being the king, the Executioner Wasp definitely ruled them all. But here's a little thing that most of you don't know. We filmed the Executioner Wasp on the same trip in 2017 as we filmed the Warrior Wasp. We didn't even know the Executioner Wasp existed until we had found a nest of them. We filmed the Warrior Wasp, found the Executioner Wasp. We actually had to look it up in the field, found one website on paper wasp species that allowed us to identify what it was. And we found out it was the biggest, most potent paper wasp species in the world. Yeah, I had to be stung by it. But we went to Japan to get the giant hornet first to make sure that it was not, in fact, the king. where we wanted the executioner to be. So hopefully that all makes sense, but there you have it. That is my climb up the insect sting pain index and a little bit of the information on why these insects are so potent and why they rank on a scale of 1 to 4 as being really painful stings. Now, with all that said, are you ever going to get stung by one of these things? Honestly, guys, probably not. It took us a lot of work and a lot of time to go out and find these creatures. So for any of you that don't know these episodes or haven't watched the Brave Wilderness channel before, you're probably scratching your head saying to yourself, why? Why would anybody go out and do this? Whether it was Justin for his book, which this is his book, The Sting of the Wild. This is like my Bible, my roadmap to the insect sting pain index. Why would you do this to write a book? Or why would you do this to create YouTube videos? And the big answer to that is education. These are creatures that most of us know very little about and would honestly probably not have the motivation to ever go and read about. The Executioner Wasp specifically had virtually no information about it out there on the internet. Now this thing has a Wikipedia page. It's got a video. Honestly, I'm not sure how many views the Executioner Wasp video has, but I think it's like 20 or 25 million views. That's a lot of people learning about a very cool insect. So the reason we did this was to bring these creatures to the forefront of media, knowledge, and education. And for you guys to understand that this is not something you necessarily need to be afraid of, whether it is an executioner wasp, a giant hornet, or a single honeybee, or the hornet or the wasp that's in your backyard, because they're all equal on the grand scale of insects that can sting you. But if you know how to properly approach them in the wild and how to not interact with them, so when I say approach, what I mean is if you see one, don't go up to it and be like, oh, cool, a hornet nest. Obviously, nobody's going to do that, but people do make the mistakes of thinking that they can destroy these nests on their own. Yeah, it's cool. I'm going to put on some baseball gloves and a hat and wear 2 sweatshirts, and I'll be able to break down that hornet nest so that it doesn't get any bigger. Bad idea, guys. A single hornet sting, if your body reacts the wrong way and you go into anaphylactic shock, can kill you. So if you want to get rid of a nest that's in your yard, the best thing to do is always call a professional to do exactly that. But if you don't mind them being there, admiring from a safe distance, if you know where the nest is completely fine, because honestly, these insects do quite a bit of good for the environment. So before we get into our last bits here, I know one burning question that a lot of people have is, A, how did I endure all of that pain? And to answer that, yeah, it's fair to say I do have a very high pain tolerance. And I went through a lot of pain to be able to make these episodes, but the motivation behind it was so that we could bring you guys, again, that education about these creatures. We don't want you guys to be afraid of tarantula hawks or even scorpions. All of these creatures serve a very important process and a meaning for our environment in this planet. And the more that we understand about them, the more that we accept them and realize that our odds of running into them are not very good, the better the planet is going to be as a whole. Trust me, we want these creepy crawly insects, even though they can sting us, as a part of our planet. Now, whether or not I'm going to ever come out of sting retirement, because I do get a lot of questions about that. I do see some questions coming up. Coyote, when are you going to get stung by the Wallace's giant bee? Or what about that wasp that has a stinger that's supposed to be like 6 inches long? I'm not saying that I won't ever come out of sting retirement, but the reason that we stopped making the sting episodes is because we wanted to evolve on to the next level. We had to come up with something new. That's why last year we made Brave the Wild, our television series on Animal Planet. This year, because of coronavirus and all the quarantines, international travel has been a bit more difficult, which means that producing television this year is not likely going to be possible. But we've launched a couple of new concepts. And if you're into the Brave Wilderness channel, you see that recently we had some pretty popular videos on milking venomous snakes and how that venom reacts with human blood. So a little spoiler alert for those of you that have tuned in today. Yes, there will be more snake milking episodes. And yes, there will be more coyote blood mixed with venom. So that pretty much brings us to the end of today's class. That's all about how I become a human pincushion so you guys can learn more about the insects that call our planet home. So I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Certainly for Varsity Tutors for allowing me to be a part of this really cool summer camp education series. And make sure to stay tuned next week for our brutal truth behind a lot of the bites that I have endured. But before we get to that, Brian's going to hop back on screen here. We're going to do some pictures, we're going to do some Q&A and hang out for a bit longer. So Brian, take it away.
Exactly. Hey, thanks a ton, Coyote. That was like, I feel like my arm swelled up just listening to you talk about some of those things. Hopefully everybody learned a lot, had a lot of fun, and knows how to be more careful in your backyard this summer. I know everybody else has been salivating over that hat. And so we've got a chance to win the hat and to get a picture with it for, there's only gonna be one winner, but for everybody else. So if you got those cameras ready, I know we mentioned that at the beginning, we're gonna give you guys about 30 seconds to lean into the camera, get a picture with Coyote. And as soon as you're done with that, I'll pop up the rules. But if you post it to Instagram and tag Coyote, tag Varsity Tutors, you'll be entered to win that hat. And so Coyote, take it away. Let's take some pictures.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, guys, is I'll do one post that's just kind of me smiling, and then I've got our Executioner Wasp toy here as well. So I'll do like a crazy stung one as well. So we'll do two different versions. First is just the normal Coyote smile. All right, ready? I'll hold this for about 15 seconds. That's a long hold for a smile there. All right, hopefully you guys got that selfie in that amount of time. Now let's do a fun one with the Executioner Wasp. So I'm going to hold this up to my arm like this, and maybe you guys make a crazy stinging face as well for the selfie. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. There we go. I feel like I'm taking thumbnails for a YouTube video.
It's perfect. Yeah, your mom always said, if you make a face like that, it may stay that way. Yours kind of, actually, that's kind of, who you are these days. I mentioned we're going to post the rules here for just a second so everybody has them, and you can find those. There's a link on your classroom page as well. But if you tag Coyote, tag Varsity Tutors, you'll be entered to win. And so please do that. If you didn't get the perfect picture the way you wanted to, we'll have an opportunity to do that next week as well. So the contest will continue. While we've got Coyote, though, bring you back on screen here. You guys were amazing answering questions. I think a lot of right answers from that group. They were smarter than I thought, Coyote. So I don't know about you. You guys asked a ton of great questions. Coyote answered a lot of those for us, but there's still some really good ones that I wanted to go through. One of my favorites was from Cam in Chicago. Cam asked, Coyote, how did you get interested or start following animals around and eventually, creating the Brave Wilderness channel?
Great question, Cam. Thanks for that one. So I've loved animals my entire life, but it's difficult to try to find what's the right formula to bring a love for animals together with the world of entertainment. When I was in college, I studied screenwriting, producing, and directing. So to be honest, a lot of my background came from behind the camera originally. I never intended to be somebody in front of a camera, whether in front of a class session like this or making YouTube videos or TV shows. But I realized that being able to get out there in the environment with my skill set of getting close to animals, in some instances being able to successfully and safely catch them and get them up close for the cameras, really was the right formula to bring people this new wave of animals, adventure, and entertainment. I grew up on all the greats, Steve Irwin, Jeff Corwin, Austin Stevens, Marty Stauffer, Jack Hanna. I mean, you name it. I've watched every piece of content ever produced by honestly anybody, I think, that's produced animal adventure content. I just wanted to absorb as much as I could to learn from the greats and then continue honing and practicing my craft to be able to do what we do today.
Well, we're glad you did. That worked out really well for the world. So, so thank you, and thanks to Cam for that question. Another one, I know you talked about being scared for some of the stings. Beckett and Weston in Grand Rapids were asking, what's the most scared you've been for a sting, or really, what's the most scared you've been encountering an animal at any point in time?
That's a great question. Thanks for that one, guys. Yeah, the stings do have their own level of fear. There's a different kind of fear because there's that anticipation buildup where you don't know exactly how bad it's going to hurt. Like, you know it's going to hurt. It's just how bad it's going to be, and then how's your body going to react. But I would say the scariest scenarios I've been in are the ones that are unexpected. The one story that comes to mind is we've got a video called Bear Scare, where my team and I had stumbled upon a mother grizzly bear and her 3 cubs on the side of a river in Alaska. And we're not talking like, oh, we were in a park. We were in the middle of nowhere, miles and miles and miles away from civilization. And the bear really wasn't capable of seeing, hearing, or smelling us based on the position we were in on the river. We actually had to get her attention by waving our arms and going, yo, bear, yo, bear. And when that mother bear stood up on her hind legs at less than 100 yards, and you see a full-grown mother grizzly on her hind legs looking at you, and her cubs weren't small. They were like German Shepherd-sized cubs. And you're thinking, oh boy, please go the other way, because if you decide to come our direction and attack, like, we're all going to be lunch. Fortunately, she went the other direction, but it was without question probably the most terrified encounter I've ever felt in an encounter in nature.
I'm terrified for you. That's crazy. We actually did have some questions we may save for next week when we talk about bites, about bears, coyotes, and great white sharks. Maybe we'll save those. Everybody who had good bite questions, your day is coming. Tune in next week. Another one of my favorites, and I didn't get the name, but I thought this was really cool. Somebody said, hey, I'm a fan of your channel. I love bugs, but I'm terrified of bugs. So I'm scared to be around them. How do I become less scared of bugs?
That's a great question. I experienced that a lot with, I say there's the 3 big S's that people are afraid of: snakes, sharks, and spiders. Certainly you can rope bugs into anything. People are afraid of things that they don't necessarily understand, right? So it's all about getting yourself an education, whether that's watching videos, could be Brave Wilderness videos, whether it's reading information on the internet, it could be going to the library to read field guides. To understand the purpose of these creatures helps you better understand why you shouldn't be afraid of them. And then I oftentimes encourage people to visit one of their local wildlife centers or museums or local parks. A lot of times these places have ambassador animals that they keep on hand for you to interact with. It could be, let's say, a fear of snakes. And if you handle your first ball python, garter snake, or rat snake, and you realize this is a super calm snake species, it's not going to bite me, it helps you overcome that fear. A lot of people that are afraid of spiders, that fear of arachnophobia, will actually handle a tarantula for the first time. We're talking about a huge, scary, furry spider with big fangs, but it's not going to bite you. So if you can get over that fear of holding onto a tarantula, then when you see a spider skitter across the floor in your house, or maybe it's out building a web in your shed, you aren't necessarily as afraid of it as you were before. So long story short, the best way to overcome your fears is to face them by doing research and then interacting with one of these animals in a safe and controlled environment.
That's great advice. Yeah, I think we always fear what we don't know. And like you're doing with Brave Wilderness, like we're doing at Varsity Tutors, education is the key. The more you know, the more comfortable you are. So I actually think that may be a great place to end it for today. Also, time flies when you're having fun. We've been going for a while here. So thanks to everybody for hanging on. I know it's a blast. I kind of looked at the clock. I'm like, wow, I can't believe how much fun we've been having. So Coyote, huge thanks to you. I guess my last question for you is what's coming up next week? Why should people come back? I mean, why should they come back? We know they should come back, but specifically, why should they come back next Tuesday?
Next week's going to be fun. We're going to be talking about the brutal truth behind the bites that I've taken. And the thing is, people love the sting episodes. I love talking about the bites because there's such a variation in the different animals that I've been bitten by. So we'll have some cool props next week. We'll have lots of great stuff to talk about. Make sure to tune in. I promise you're not going to want to miss the next one.
Perfect. Well, I definitely won't miss it. So I'll see you here next week, Coyote. Thanks a ton to everyone for all of your questions. Remember a couple kind of closing things. If you took those pictures and you want to post those to Instagram, tag Varsity Tutors and Coyote Peterson, you'll be entered to win the hat. Join us next week, same time, same place. We'll do the brutal truth of bites. And in the meantime, if you want a little bit more kind of creature education in your life, check out the page where you registered for this class. We got a whole wildlife creature camp with all kinds of lessons about different types of animals all summer long. So check all those out. Everybody, we'll see you again next week. And Coyote, thanks again for a great class.
You're welcome. How about I'll do a classic sign off and then we'll call it. Here we go, you guys. Ready? I'm Coyote Peterson. Be brave. Stay wild. We'll see you on the next adventure. And see you in class next week, guys. Bye.